evil entity in the house.
You are about to see real people
I was terrified beyond belief.
reliving horrifying paranormal encounters for the first time.
I truly felt it was like living in hell.
As spirits return from the dark side to deliver evil messages.
This can't really be happening.
You can't explain the fear.
I've never been that scared in my entire life.
I wanted to get out of that house.
Be prepared to be afraid.
Story 20C, take 5. Marker.
Kansas is not bad. The nice thing about it, it's still a smaller city. I was looking online at all these different houses, and was the right time, good prices, and easy to get mortgages. So, made a move. It was a foreclosure, so that makes it a lot easier to buy a house in decent condition. I actually didn't know a lot about my house before I bought it because it was a foreclosure. So pretty much the online listing said home located in Kalamazoo, great condition, sold as is. Everything was great the first few months of the house. Never had any issues. I met Dave about February 2013. We started talking online.
One day I bothered him enough to meet me, so he did and kind of hit it off. There were some issues in July, and I was actually moving to Kalamazoo, so Dan said one day, you know, well, move in with me.
He moved in about September last year.
My first impression of Dan's house was it was a very nice house, you know. It was a good starter home.
The first few days after David moved in, everything was good. We never had any issues with the house. It was just peaceful. The next few months, everything was calm all through holidays. The first experiences we had was right after we had visited my brother for the 4th of July. We had come home and my brother had given us this Bible. Didn't think anything of this Bible. We just had it sitting on an end table at the house.
We got home and we were both tired, so we laid down, and it was probably 12 or 1 o'clock, and I had the TV on still.
Hey, Sarge, we got another one here. Another one left. This guy doesn't have his enough.
Out of nowhere, the door just slowly shuts. I got up and opened the door again. There's nothing there. I laid back down and you could just hear creaking along the bed right next to me. A minute later, I heard something fall in the kitchen. I stayed up all night worrying something would happen.
The next morning, he told me about it, and I was a little skeptical. I hadn't experienced anything in the house. First occurrence I was home by myself is during the day. I just got home from work. I heard in the kitchen the dining room chair slam against the floor. Then I heard running across the kitchen. and the basement door fly open and hit the wall. So I hurry up and walk towards the kitchen area. And I see the basement door moving still because it opened with such force. And I see shoes scattered, like they're just thrown down the kitchen area. My logical side's fighting with me, saying this can't really be happening, but deep down inside, I'm terrified. That was the first occurrence that I had at the house.
When you're dealing with any type of aggravated spirit, they will do whatever they can. Obviously, the more energy that a spirit has, the greater the damage that they can do.
Within a few minutes, David actually came home.
Dan looked very startled. You could just tell that something just happened to Dan that he couldn't explain.
After that happened, the rest of the day, every little sound, you'd be worried that something else was going to happen.
It goes from you being the sole person to experience it to, okay, now it's an event. Now it became real because you're not the only one.
Putting aside the signs that something was potentially amiss in his home, Dan went to work on a renovation project in the basement while David was out.
I was in the basement by myself. I was working on replacing some doors in the house, so I was chiseling out the hinges and cutting out where the door handles go. And as I was working on that, the cat had actually come downstairs and she was by me while I was working. And the cat was looking towards the back of the basement, and then she stops and she starts growling. And then she starts backing up. At that point, she gets right by to where I'm at, and she starts swatting and hissing really loudly. And she's so frantic to get away that she actually does a backflip and flops right on her back and is flailing around, and she runs up the basement stairs.
I actually told Dan that the back corner of the basement behind the entertainment room, it was just like hitting a wall. You'd walk back there and out of nowhere you just hit this cold spot where your hair would stand on end and you just felt this chill, and you could just tell there was something very unsettling about that space.
So at that point, I go upstairs and I get up there and she's in the living room staring right towards the basement door. At that point, I'm walking towards her and she's just looking right through me or trying to look around me just at the door. And she gets frantic again, starts clawing towards that area, and she just runs right to the bedroom. And she won't come out the rest of the day.
I got home after what happened to Dan in the basement, probably 30 minutes later. You know, I went downstairs and started working on a project that I was working on while Dan went back to his doors, and Kitty, of course, was right next to you. She wouldn't leave you. Well, I turned around and I was staring at Kitty, and she started swatting at the air out of nowhere, you know, just swatting at the air. And Dan walked up to the door and he asked me, you know, what are you doing? And I just let out a rather loud shh. In the back corner, 3 seconds later, you could hear a woman in a woman's voice going shh back at me. We both said in sync, you know, did you just hear that?
That was the first occurrence where we were both aware and we both heard at the same time.
We probably didn't go back in the basement for anything other than laundry after that.
After a couple of days with no recurring incidents, Dan and David started to think it must have been their imagination.
We were sitting on the couch and I kept like glancing back in the hallway just because a moment before I saw something.
Dan Engblom and David Powers had been experiencing weird paranormal activity in their home, and it was getting too much for David to bear.
We were sitting on the couch and I kept like glancing back in the hallway just because a moment before I saw something. I said, I think I'm seeing someone in the guest bedroom.
think that you see it, but then as soon as you go to look at it, it's not there.
Gosh, I hate to be stuck like that. Hey, more shots, don't you? Once is really enough. Yeah, sure you can. It's not like scaring me through my subway.
He didn't really acknowledge it. He thought I was crazy.
Yeah, they all say that. Let me back it home, please. Let me show you what we can do.
Still skeptical that anything paranormal was happening in his home, Dan was alone one night while David went to the gym.
I was watching a TV show, and that's when a loud bang happened. Out the corner of my eye, I saw shadows from the kitchen area. After that happened, the lights in the kitchen and the living room all dimmed, and then they flickered out. And then they came back on. It felt like my heart dropped at that point. There was a very musty body odor smell that you couldn't really pinpoint where it was coming from. You just smell it, and then it'd be gone. At that point, I just ran out of the house. And I waited until David got home, and we stayed outside for about an hour after he got back. I was terrified.
I did believe Dan. You know, Dan's a very rational person. So when he says, you know, he can't explain something, then I'd have to believe him.
At that point, I knew we needed to contact someone and try and figure out what was going on and get some help.
Terrified that the unexplained events in their home would get worse, Dan and David called in a father-daughter paranormal investigation team.
The intent and the purpose of the pre-investigation is to gather relevant information and to substantiate if what they've told us is accurate and true.
Just pulling up in the drive, you know, I had looked at my dad and told him something's off. And then definitely once we walked into the home, there was a very heavy feeling. It felt dark.
Dan, nice to meet you. Dan, thanks for coming, guys. Yeah, it's just over here.
I was very relieved when they first came because it was a step towards something.
Just seeing the video cameras and the tape recorders, all that, it makes it more real.
Well, during the walkthrough, we had them take us to the locations that they had specific issues that they could go back, you know, and outline for us.
We deployed all of our recorders. We used K2 meters. We also used an Ovilus.
They used their infrared camera and took pictures throughout the house.
Thermal imaging, our thermal imaging camera allows us to see in a realm that our eyes aren't able to.
They did use the camera on the cat a few times. They actually picked up a really compelling picture they had of, there's actually a hand on the cat's back as she was looking up. You could see this arm and hand right on her.
And it's like 30 degrees cooler than the cat's temperature, and you can see a hand going along its back.
Having witnessed and collected enough evidence, Alan and Anna left the home to sort through their findings.
Right after that first investigation, we did exchange a few emails back and forth. One of the emails, I was actually getting ready for work, and I was in the bathroom getting ready, and I saw an email come in, and I'm reading this email from them, and as I'm reading it, I hear footsteps down the hallway. I open the door, and I walk out of the bathroom, and David's in the bedroom.
David, you won't believe this email I just got.
And I'm telling him about the email that I had just gotten from Alan and Anna, and as I'm doing that, he stops me, and he's like, "There's someone behind you." All you hear just stands up on your arms. you just get this primal fear.
It was a very old man with sunken in cheeks, and it's a face you'll never forget.
You know that there's something there.
I've never been that scared in my entire life, especially when it's looking right at you.
The email from Alan and Anna said that they're 100% sure that there is something going on at the house. They had sound recordings and infrared images that confirmed and showed all the evidence. I'm scared I'm gonna have to sell my house.
Due to the findings, we made arrangements to get right back, and I think it was 3 days later we conducted our investigation.
Alan and Anna came out for the second time. After about a few hours in is when there started to be a little activity. Alan and Anna were downstairs in the basement. They had the spirit box on this old tool chest that I got from my dad, and Alan kept trying to ask who was down there.
What's your name?
He was asking if someone was down there to say something to let them know that they're there. After he said one more time, give us a sign that you're down here, the box actually spun on top of the tool chest.
We understand that you like to hang out in this corner. Is that true?
After encountering paranormal phenomena in their home, Dan Englum and David Powers called in an investigation team to try to get evidence of any haunting. Their team's findings shocked everyone.
After he said one more time, give us a sign that you're down here, the box actually spun on top of the tool chest.
We understand that you like to hang out in this corner. Is that true? You gotta see this. I gotta stop it and back it up. We understand that you like to hang out in this corner. Is that true? I've never seen an object move in that manner. I mean, I could not replicate or debunk it.
We knew something was there, and it had a strong enough energy to be able to manipulate an object that big, and so we knew it was probably serious.
I 100% believe it to be paranormal.
The next room we went into was the guest bedroom.
They had hoped that they'd be able to speak to the old man. They did get him to interact a few times through the spirit box.
We were in there for probably 15 minutes, and the spirit box went from being very quiet to being very noisy, with an old grumpy man talking through it. And he was saying F this and F that and F you and get the F out, and just saying all these obscene, very vulgar things.
I had a meter in my hand that would go off when there was an electromagnetic field near it. There were points where the meter would completely peg, and my arm, I was holding the meter, and my arm would just start shaking uncontrollably. I just had this electrical sensation pulsing through the left side of my body.
And then out of nowhere, it just grabs me by the ankles.
It felt like we were being bullied out of our own home, yeah. It felt like whatever was there was manipulating us.
A spirit, if given the proper energy, some of them can go beyond just moving objects. Some of them could actually physically harm people, because even though their physical body's not here, their emotions still remain the same.
Now that physical things were happening, it felt like we're in more danger.
We were done at that moment. I didn't want to do anything else. I told them we're not doing anything else. They packed up all their equipment, and they left.
I felt like whatever was there didn't like us and wanted us out of the house. We didn't stay there again after that. At that point, I felt defeated. I felt completely helpless because we had just gone through all of this, and you had the hopes that we had resolved it, and it just wasn't the case.
Having reached their wits' end, Dan and David moved out of their home and stayed with friends.
It was probably a week after all this happened that Dan finally called the medium. I was skeptical about believing whether or not she could fix it.
As soon as we walked in the house, we go downstairs, and the medium said that she could sense a little girl. The little girl kept saying that she was hiding. She hid in the basement, and then she said that she killed him. It was her fault. And the medium asked her, "What's your fault?" And she said, "The fire." She said there was a fire, and she did what her mommy and daddy told her to do. She said that she went downstairs when there was the fire because her parents told her that if anything ever happened, to hide in the basement.
Right away, you just smell fire. It just smelled like fire all around you.
The little girl said that she lived in a farmhouse, and she went in the basement to hide like she was told. And she said she heard her mom and dad calling for her, and they came downstairs. And she said that the stairs collapsed, and it was her fault that they all died down there. The medium felt that it happened probably 100 years ago or more, and it was on the land that this had happened, not necessarily the home that I live in now, just the same location.
She told the little girl that it's not her fault that her parents are gone. And told her that her parents are in the light, and she needed to go to the light to find her parents, because that's all the little girl wanted was her parents. And she said that she found them. At the light, she found them. And little girl, you just smell of fire went away. It just got a little bit lighter. And you just felt good because you just felt like you helped.
We made our way back upstairs at that point.
Dan Englum and David Powers were being haunted by the spirit of an old man. They enlisted the help of a medium to cleanse their house of negative energy.
It's cold and dark.
She said the man was very vulgar. He said he was making a lot of profane statements, and he said he didn't approve of us living in his home in sin. And he said he was a good Christian man, and it's not fair that he had to die the way he did while we were living in sin in his home. What had set everything off was when we brought that Bible into the house. And the Bible made him angry because he'd always been very religious, and he felt betrayed.
If the person that lived in that house who had died was of the Christian faith, sometimes the anger that somebody has or a spirit has is enough to fuel the energy it needs.
We had discovered that he was saying that he was trying to get into the attic, and the ladder fell out, and he fell down into the basement, onto the basement stairs, and that's where he had died. After we learned how he died, we realized that he was not at peace, and we just wanted him to be able to move on.
The medium helped the spirit come to terms with his death, allowing him to cross over peacefully.
After they just were able to talk to him about his death, they burned sage throughout the house. We could feel his presence there for a little bit longer. Gradually it did fade. And since that day, there's not been another occurrence of anything from him. He had been there all that time and was trapped and had so much resentment that you couldn't move on.
Ever since the medium came in,
things have been perfect.
After they left, the house feels completely different. It felt like homey again, like it used to. Part of me wonders if I'll always be afraid to fall back asleep in the house by myself. Always in the back of your mind, that fear that something's going to happen again.
I mean, it's just not something that I feel I'll ever get over.
When an entity has an evil intention, the effects on the living can be utterly devastating.
Take 3, EB common, soft sticks mark.
My name is Tony Rogers. I'm from Lake Simcoe, a little town called Town of Georgina. It's a nice tourist area. People come through, go fishing. Me and my husband, we were looking for a quiet place to live. We just got married a year prior, so we wanted somewhere where we can raise our children and enjoy a nice, quiet town and a place for the kids to grow up and have that small community feeling where everybody knows everybody. I found out that I was pregnant. My husband was working in the city. I used to work at a daycare. I was talking to one of the neighbors, and they were looking for a babysitter, so I just got a babysitting job. And she's a very happy-go-lucky little girl, and she's just a joy, and plus, she was just directly right behind my house. I would take down the laundry to the basement. And then I had this weird feeling that I'm being watched in their basement, and I was like uneasy. So I just dropped the clothes down there and I ran back up, and it's like, you get that eerie feeling.
Tony leaned on her faith and tried to shake the unexplained feeling that she was being watched in her neighbor's house.
One time, it must have been like maybe a couple of weeks into the babysitting, I felt like I needed, like, a nap. The mom actually told me, if you ever get tired, there's a spare room right next to the baby's room. There's a monitor if she wakes up. And then all of a sudden, you feel like you're being watched. I opened my eyes and then couldn't move. And then all of a sudden, these 4 things were like right there, like 2 on each side of the bed. And they're looking down at me as I'm looking up. But I couldn't scream or move or nothing. And they were like in brown hooded robes. There's no face. It was like darkness. The baby all of a sudden started to fuss in her crib, and all of a sudden I just jolted up. I looked around and there's nothing there. went to see the baby and checked her out, and she was fine.
There have been many cases involving what we like to call either incubus or succubus cases, where a person will say that they had a dream that they were surrounded by beings without faces, and they've felt an overwhelming fear come through them and almost paralyzed, where they couldn't move. They knew it was going on, they can see what was going on, but they couldn't do anything about it.
And then the second time it happened, it was more intense.
It was 1992, and Tony Rogers was babysitting at her neighbor's house. She went to take a nap, but realized she was not alone.
And I laid in the bed, and I got the same feeling again. And I saw 5 of them this time. And it was like 2 on each side. One was in front of me. I was trying to scream, couldn't scream, trying to call for help, but no voice is coming out. And there's this one at the foot of the bed, and he reaches out his hand, and he had long claw nails kind of thing. And he went like over my stomach and scratched me. I did the sign of the cross with my tongue, and that's when I was released. You can't explain the fear. Like, it's like terrifying feeling. Especially, like, you can't explain what it was.
When dealing with the demonic, a lot of times, anything that involves a demon is usually never nice. One of the big things that demons prey off of is fear, instilling fear into somebody.
Was it a warning? Was it a sign? Was it to test me for my faith? I have no idea. I just wanted to forget about it, and I just let it go. I'm like freaked out, called my husband, and I said, this thing actually scratched me. I think there's something going on with the baby, like they're out to get my baby or something. He's like, oh, don't be ridiculous, like it's okay. And I'm like, no, I actually have a scratch mark on my stomach, like something scratched me. I can't be here anymore. And he's like, don't worry about it. We have an ultrasound coming up in a couple of days. Everything's gonna be fine. But at that moment I knew, like, there's something that's not right with the baby. I don't know what or why those things were there, but as a pregnant mother, I knew there was something not right. So I told the lady, I said, I can't do this anymore. So we went for the ultrasound, and then they found that there was something wrong with the baby. He was born on April 26th. Complications, his chest cavity was too small for his lungs, and he lived for 13 days, and we had to take him off life support, and I had to say goodbye. I'm living in this house, and the plans were to have children. Feeling like a failure as a mom, as a wife, as a person. Six months later, I got pregnant again with our second child. And Jesse was born, and it turned out he was a boy, and a healthy boy at that. You can't explain the excitement, like it's beyond happiness, being a mom. Things were like, you know, good. Everything at the house was awesome. And, you know, Dad went to work, Mom stayed at home, raised the baby. clean the house, you know, good old housewife.
Tony was grateful for her second chance at being a mother, and all the unexplained incidents seemed to stop. Until one night, more than 2 years later.
Jesse was 2.5. We were all sleeping. It was like 2 in the morning. We heard Jesse screaming at the top of his lungs.
Mommy! Mom! Mommy! Mom!
Me and my husband go to the room to check out the situation.
Mommy!
He was screaming that some man was trying to pull him inside the wall. I was scared for my son's well-being, my well-being, and I wanted to get out of that house.
Fearing that the malevolent spirit that had been haunting her was now targeting her son, Tony decided to do some research on her house.
I went to the town and got the city records of who lived in my house. Every 6 months to a year, people were moving in and out, and I've been there the longest. My husband was more skeptical, like he didn't believe. So then I just kept it to myself. I'm not going to talk about it because I don't want people to think I'm nuts.
Tony tried to dismiss the strange events as coincidence, but any hope that they would stop were soon dashed.
I guess it was about 11:30, 12. Slept into bed. All of a sudden I see out of the closet coming some older woman.
Tony Rogers had been living with evil spirits in her home for years. So far, their intention seemed to be to harm her family.
I guess it was about 11:30, 12. Slept into bed. All of a sudden I see out of the closet coming some older woman. She walks around the bed and she walks over towards on the other side where my husband's sleeping. She's placing these roses on top of his chest. And she spoke to me in Italian. She says, "Non ti preoccupare, figlia mia, tutto va bene," which means, "Don't worry, my child, everything will be fine." And as she did that, my husband started to choke because I felt like I was being choked, or I felt pressure. I didn't understand it, and we just let it go at that. A couple of days later, I go to my mom's house. I was going through my parents' photo album, and I spotted this woman in this picture. She had black hair. She kind of looked like me, actually.
Completely taken aback, Tony saw a photo of the same spirit that had visited her only a few nights previously.
And I asked my mom, "Who is this lady?" And my mom said, "That's Nonna, like that's my mother." I was the only one out of my family that was born in Canada, and so I've never had the pleasure of meeting any of my grandparents. About a week later, my husband packed his things and walked out on us. That kept playing in my mind, like over and over again. Why would my grandmother come out of the closet with a dozen roses and say that it's gonna be okay? And now it makes sense. She was protecting me or giving me a sign that my husband was planning to leave me, because I was shocked when he decided to walk out.
With the absence of her husband, Tony struggled to make ends meet for herself and her young son.
That's when I decided to put my house up for sale. We put the house on the market. We got an interested buyer, contractor actually. He was planning to tear down and rebuild. He came for his inspection, and I wasn't allowed to be in the house at the time. I said to the contractor, make sure you close the door behind you, and off I went. Come back home after an hour, and I noticed my front door is open.
Hello? Is anybody here? Hello? Hello?
And I look into my son's room, and I notice on his bed, all the stuffed animals on my son's bed were upside down. And I look in the trap door, and it's open, and there's an extension cord with a triple light leading to the crawl space.
Are you here? Hello?
There was an evil entity in the house.
You are about to see real people
I was terrified beyond belief.
reliving horrifying paranormal encounters for the first time.
I truly felt it was like living in hell.
When skeptics become believers.
I always just thought it wasn't real. It was, just fake hocus pocus stuff.
I had a very myopic black and white view of the world. Now I'm talking to dead people.
I buried this for nearly 30 years.
Be prepared to be afraid.
Marker?
Before we purchased our house in Bloomingdale, I was living in a small condo with my husband, and it was very small and it was far away from both of our jobs. So we wanted to find a house that was closer to our jobs. The first impression I got was that it was very eerie. They had bushes that were overgrown in the front. The house needed a lot of work. I saw crumbling masonry work in the front and the back. The roof was old, the siding was old. We walked into the inside, and it was just the eeriest house I think I've ever seen, but I liked it. We did close on the house in December 1997, and I couldn't wait to get started on it because the inside was so dreary. Just being in that house, there was just something different. I couldn't put my finger on it yet. Of course, there was a lot of noises, banging, dragging. I just chalked it up. It's an old house. There are going to be noises. I'm very skeptical with saying this noise doesn't make sense. Very shortly after we moved in, I just started getting a very strange feeling that something wasn't right. Every night I would go to sleep and I would have this nightmare. I was in the house alone and I had a very horrible feeling about it. I'd be at the top of the stairwell, and I knew something very ominous was at the bottom. And I would look at a shelf and something would fly off. and I would see a shadow at the bottom of the stairs. It would start to move up, and I'd hear breathing. You just felt as if you were going to be killed, attacked, something. And then that's when I would always wake up. And it turned out I had that nightmare every night for months. I had told my husband, I don't even want to go to sleep because I know I'm going to have that dream.
Patty had always been skeptical of the paranormal, but events in the house were beginning to convince her otherwise.
I went down to do laundry, and we have the biggest container of laundry detergent. And I did the laundry, put it back on the shelf. The detergent went back up in the kitchen, and when it was done, the laundry detergent wasn't on the shelf. I looked, and it was sitting 10 feet out into the basement, upright. I just tried to ignore it, picked it up, did the second load, put it back on the shelf. When I came down a third time, it was right back out in the basement again. That's probably the first time when I thought, it's almost like a mischievous child playing tricks on me. There was something about that house, and I had even said to my husband one day, you're going to think I'm crazy. I think this house is alive. There's something about this house. I don't know what it is, but there is. He just was of the opinion, if you ignore it, it will go away. He believed my dreams were caused from anxiety, moving into a new house. He just didn't buy into it and kind of turned a blind eye.
I find that skeptics will gravitate to rationality before anything else. In their mind, they have convinced themselves that it can't be anything other than something rational. So they will take it that, oh, it must have been this, or they'll find any reason they can to prove that it's not paranormal.
A few days later, I'm cleaning the house. We have French doors on our upper level going to the deck. And I see little handprints on the bottom of the window. And I told my husband about it. He goes, oh, you know, just forget about it. A couple days later, I saw them on again. My husband was home. I said, come here, I want you to tell me what you see. He looked and he goes, it looks like a child's handprint. One of the situations that scared me the most, and I knew I had to find out and get to the bottom of it, again, happened in my room.
Patty Haig started having terrifying dreams as soon as she moved into her new home. But the nightmares were turning into reality.
I dreamt of the child that I thought was in the house, and he bit me in the arm. And I woke up, I said, wow, that dream really hurt. And when I was in the shower the next day, I was bitten. Now, I couldn't fit that in my mouth to put that bite mark, and it was a small mouth. So that dream was a dream, but it wasn't a dream. I can't explain that.
It became more than a dream when old friends Roseanne and Joe came over to the house for a visit.
She was with a gentleman, and he was a big, burly, 6'3" contractor. Roseanne had mentioned the apparition, and Joe started making fun of it. I had asked him not to do that, and he continued to do that. The next thing we knew, and I saw it and Roseanne saw it, his stool was yanked out from under him. He landed on the ground. So, of course, we're like, Joe, are you okay? He got up and started crying. Started crying like a baby, and he said, Roseanne, we gotta go. We gotta go. Roseanne called me later and said, Joe said there's something evil in that house. When I fell on the floor, something whispered in my ear, you are going to die tonight. He goes, I'm never going back in that house again. And he never did. I just didn't know what to think. It can't be just my home. There's too much is happening. There's something happened around here, and I don't know what it was. I met my neighbor. She was walking her dog. I said, can I ask you a question? She goes, what? What? I said, do you have anything strange going on in your house that you can't explain? And she goes, what do you mean? I go, here we go. She's going to have me committed. And I just looked at her. I said, ghosts. Her jaw dropped. She goes, I can't believe you said that. She goes, ever since I moved in, she goes, things have been going on in the house that I can't explain. It turns out many people in that area were having experiences, but my house, everybody seemed to point to my house and said, but that's where it really gets very strange. I had to get to the bottom of this, how to find out, and I didn't even know really paranormal groups existed. When I Googled hauntings in Bloomingdale, I saw Mark's website.
I first heard from Patty back in February of 2008, and she was looking for us to come in and perform a professional scientific investigation. Now, during this time, we were doing audio recording, trying to capture EVP, which stands for Electronic Voice Phenomena. Also, during the investigation, we had a video camera with night vision set up in the master bedroom, pointed at her dresser where she felt like she had seen things before. Patty was sitting on the bed nearby with one of our other investigators.
And really, I was talking, but, you know, no one was getting anything. But I looked at the dresser, and I saw a white, almost like a mist or a shadow in front of the dresser.
So the cameraman, the investigator, panned the camera around from the dresser to see if he could capture anything. When he panned the camera to the left,
Evidence of the paranormal was becoming harder to ignore at Patty Haig's house. Now a guest had been threatened. You are going to die tonight. Wanting answers, Patty had called in a paranormal investigation team.
So the cameraman, the investigator, panned the camera around from the dresser to see if he could capture anything. When he panned the camera to the left, all of a sudden, he captured what looked like a head with no features. You cannot see a face or anything, but it looked like a head with a hairline.
And it had very dark hair, and you can't see features of a face. It's bizarre. You see the hair and it's sticking in.
And then after a second, it seems to realize it's being filmed, and it slides right out of the frame. We felt that it was the land that had the activity more than Patty's house alone. So we made arrangements to bring in a ground-penetrating radar team to scan that area to see what they could find. And the results were very interesting because the radar operator said he found 5 areas of interest. And looking at the imagery, you can see the white spots that they found, that it was in his opinion that they could have been human burials still underground. It was our impression that this could have been a Native American site with circles, possibly a medicine wheel or other types of ceremonial circle used in their religion. If it's possible that if it was used for ceremonial purposes with the spirits, that might account for some of the activity that we were encountering in the area.
Once Mark and his team came in and did their investigations, activity did pick up in the house significantly, where it almost appeared that now it was taking more of a malicious turn for me. You just felt like you were going to be attacked. You felt like you were going to be murdered. I was pushed down my oak stairwell. And I knew if I didn't leave that house, I wasn't going to survive in that house. It would have been a disaster for me to stay in that home. So when my husband got a new job down south, that was probably the happiest news I had in years. I didn't care if we had to live in a tent somewhere. I honestly didn't. I would have been happy living in a tent to get out of that house. The last day of the house, I stood outside the door, closed it, locked for the last time, and got in my car. I felt a lightness that I haven't felt in years. I felt like a new person, a happy person.
The house had finally convinced Patty that another plane existed, and it was too much for her to live with.
It was that location, it stayed at that location, and now I'm living in a place that is completely free of any kind of paranormal activity, and I would never go back, ever.
Skeptics of the paranormal often demand scientific proof before they will believe in the afterlife. But an intimate first-hand experience can lead to a dramatic change of mind.
So we lived in Toronto for about 4 years. We had it was a beautiful luxury condo on the lake, and everyone thought we had the best life going. But we were really unhappy, and looking back, we were unfulfilled.
Well, condo life for me was a little bit difficult because we wanted to be closer to nature. We wanted to have more of just a real connection with, you know, the earth around us. And we weren't really feeling that where we were living. We went on the hunt for a house. And so I said to Jennifer, I said, let's go out to this place called Brantford, which I hadn't even heard of before. As we were getting closer and closer to the house, we were getting more skeptical because it was kind of like a subdivision that we were driving through.
And we pulled up to this little house on the hill. We both instantly fell in love with it, and everyone thought we were crazy.
It was a very stark contrast to what we were living in Toronto. And when we got here, we knocked on the door, and this older gentleman came to the door. He was well into his 90s. And actually, it was the owner. The agent hadn't arrived yet. He said, oh, come on in, come on in. He was 94, and he wanted to interview everybody who was interested in purchasing the property. He really wanted the property to stay intact. And he said, what are your plans with the house? And I said, well, Jack, I think it needs a paint job, to be honest, so I think I might paint it if you don't mind. And he said, no, that's fine. Jack's wife died when he was in his 70s, I believe. And he believed that he would probably die soon after. He didn't expect to be here as long as he was here for.
Jack took a liking to Jen and Daryl and sold them the house.
We moved in September 30th of 2011. What we thought was a paint job turned into a complete gut job.
It was during the renovation that Jen and Daryl began to notice strange things.
Paintbrushes will go missing, keys will go missing. I had a book that went missing.
If we lived in a really big house, I think it'd be easier to kind of, but our house is very small, so how far can something travel?
When their complicated renovation was in full swing, what was supposed to be the easy job became the most baffling.
And there was one particular paint color that Daryl would put on, and the paint would not stick. It just wouldn't stick. And it would fall off, and it would clump off, and it would drip off. We thought, what the heck? So we took it back to the paint company. The paint company said, paint's fine. I don't know what your problem is. So Daryl thought, well, maybe, he just thought, you know, something came in his head, let's try a different color. Got the same paint in a different color, put it on, it went on perfectly. So we joke about the fact that Jack's wife was like, I'm not having that color paint in my house.
Although happy to joke about it, the couple were skeptical that anything otherworldly was actually happening in their home.
A lot of times when a family moves into a house, they'll do renovations, they'll fix things, they'll change things. A spirit that has been there for many years, they're used to a certain thing and they're used to a certain way that their house was. If you go there and try to create things and do things, they take offense to that. Like, hey, you know what? I was here many years before you and you're not going to change this. And if you are, I'm going to make it difficult for you to do so.
Daryl had never believed in anything paranormal.
I've always been a skeptic. I guess I would need to see evidence of that to believe that. During all the construction and all the chaos, Charlie, my little dog, he and I were the first two to move into the house. There are times where he'll just, for example, he'll be in the living room and he'll look out into the kitchen and he'll just stare and stare and stare and stare, and you're thinking, you're not staring at food, you're not staring at water, you're just kind of staring into the room, and you're thinking, why are you doing that? You can tell he's looking, like he's watching something, and you kind of put your head around to see if you can see something too, you know, but I don't see anything. See something, because I don't think he would stand and just stare for so long at nothing. So that's kind of strange, yeah.
But it was Jen's experiences that would truly turn a skeptic into a believer.
It just smelled like baking. Like I'd wake up and Daryl doesn't cook or bake. I'd sort of smell the air and I'm like, oh, someone's been baking, like vanilla. You know that very distinct smell of vanilla? And sometimes a very distinct smell of like apple pie. I was like, oh, it smells so good. And there would be nothing there. There was nothing that could have made that smell. You just sort of shake your head and go, okay, you know, and I was still adjusting to living to the country. And I heard the cupboards, and again, at first I thought it was mice or, you know, whatever, because the house was being renovated.
Daryl and Jen White fell in love with their little house on the hill, but after promising the previous owner they wouldn't renovate, they decided to do just that.
I heard the cupboards, and again, at first I thought it was mice or, you know, whatever, because the house was being renovated. and there she was standing facing the stove. I wanted to authenticate my experiences and make sure that it wasn't, you know, all in my head. I just knew when I said, I saw this woman in my house, that I thought, oh my God, they think I'm gonna crazy, or you know, they're gonna go, oh my God, these crazy like city people have had, you know, too much country air. And when I reached out to the neighbors, they said, oh yeah, I think I've got a ghost in the house, and I described her. Oh, that's Jack's wife. And they said, you described her a T, and then someone took out the photo album. I'm like, okay. That was Jack's wife. That was the woman. I recognized her, like, that's what she looked like. Found out that Jack's wife, quite tragically, had a stroke or an aneurysm one night. Jack was watching hockey about 25 years ago, and she said, I wasn't feeling well. She got up to go lie down, and she dropped dead between here and the back bedroom. Apparently, she was a prolific baker. So that was a really big watershed moment for me that, yeah, I'm living with something. My life was about to change. As soon as I sort of admitted it, then it started to get like exponentially more frequent and powerful. The cupboard doors would slam, and I would be in bed, and I'd be like, Daryl, like, knock it off. And he'd be like, I'm not anywhere near them. And she turned around and looked at me and kind of smiled at me and then vanished. Okay, this is real, this is happening. The neighbor, Janet, had let me know Jack had passed. And then it was about 2 days later when the kids had called and said, would we be okay with him being scattered out back? So they came back here and scattered his ashes back in the woods where he was most happy.
With Jack's death, a new wave of paranormal events started.
When we'd moved in, they'd cleaned pretty much everything out, but there was this one chair that was down in the basement. The neighbors had said to me, oh, that was Jack's chair. It was this wooden chair that he always sat on outside and watched the world go by. And so I thought, well, it's ugly. So I tossed it in the garage and thought, okay, next garbage day, I'll get rid of it. And it would reappear in the house. Like, we would find it in the basement, or it would go back to where he used to sit. And I'd say to Daryl, why is that chair out in the middle of the backyard? He's like, I didn't put it there.
Jen found that once she opened her mind to the paranormal, her experiences became more powerful.
I went for a walk, and I took the dog, and the dog started barking his head off. Barking, 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 and then he started staring up the hill, and I thought. So I turned my head, and I looked up the hill. And there, standing there, I'll never forget it because I can still see his eyes, was Jack. So I said to him, I said, hey, Jack, you know, I'm so glad that all is good, and I promise you we're taking great care of the house. And then he vanished, and we continued on with our walk. So it was a really interesting and unique experience.
A paranormal encounter changes many lives every day, and a lot of it has to do with the acceptance of knowing that something is there that is not supposed to be.
So I was that typical like Anglo-Saxon Protestant conservative person who had a great job. I had a very myopic black and white view of the world. Now I'm talking to dead people. All of a sudden, I accept and respect that there's a whole lot out there that we don't understand.
Once you know that there is life after death, you may treat your life a lot differently. You may live it differently. You may not take it for granted to know that in a split second in time, you could be in that same altered state. There's good advantages that come out of a paranormal encounter, and a lot of it is to appreciate life as you know it while you're alive.
Since Jack's passed, I haven't seen her, which is really interesting. So when Jack passed, I have not seen her since. I haven't smelt her, I haven't seen her, I have nothing. And I think because she died so suddenly and Jack stayed here for so long that I'm convinced that she was here the whole time Jack was.
A relationship between a husband and wife that maybe the marriage lasted 30 years. you don't want to be away from your partner. So there are spirits who will hang around and wait for that, and them two can live a life together in the afterlife.
We still call Jack's house and Jack's property. We've been here 4 years. I don't know if we'll ever stop calling Jack's house.
As a skeptic dealing with the paranormal, there comes a point where rational explanations just won't cut it. When the paranormal becomes a physical threat, there is no choice but to believe.
Story 26, Greg, take 1, marker. Story 26, Danielle, take 4, marker. I've never had any encounters before. Never really thought about it before. And it's just something that, you know, I always just thought wasn't real. It's, you know, just fake hocus pocus stuff.
I met Greg through MySpace.
She thought that I was cute, so we started talking.
I have 3 children, Grant, Dylan, and Emily. They fell in love with Greg, and so did I. In December of 2008, Greg opened his home to us.
It was a kind of a rundown building, but it was cheap rent and it served its purpose. Her and her daughter, Emily, came up on the bus, started unpacking stuff, and she was like, oh, you know, I can rearrange your house now and, you know, make it the way I want to. I didn't have a lot of stuff. I was used to the military life. You know, being in the military, you minimize everything. And with Danielle, it was just, you know, it brightened it up a little bit more. You know, there's more colors, more flowery stuff, and, you know, just a woman's touch, and it made it a lot better.
But this good feeling would not last long.
It was just the little things at first. We'd want to go out to dinner or something like that, and be like, okay, you know, time to grab the keys. Walk over, went to grab for them, and they're not there. That's like, okay, you know, who's got the keys? And nobody's got the keys. You search and you search and you search. You know, keys are nowhere to be found. Almost back into the first location where I first looked for them. There are the keys, and it's like, no way. There's no way those keys could be there. Couldn't explain it.
Spirits will move things if they know that it bothers you and intimidates you. Sometimes they'll play games. They'll take the smaller objects because it takes less energy to move those things. And sometimes they could be sending a message. It's hard to really tell with them because there are a lot of them that are tricksters.
One time, we were sitting down and having cookies and milk.
Emily told me, she goes, Mommy, I have this friend named Michael. He likes to play with me. And I said, well, that's nice, honey. Would you like to share cookies and milk with Michael? She goes, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you just see the glass move like 6 inches.
6 inches to an empty space. This empty space beside Emily.
What do you say when that happens? You know, there's no good reason for something like that to happen, especially when she just got done saying, you know, go ahead, you can share your cookies and milk with them.
It wouldn't take long before the paranormal became more real.
Actually, a couple of days later, I had another experience myself. And all of a sudden, something grabbed the back of my leg.
Danielle Koch had begun to experience strange phenomena in their home, but were reluctant to believe they could have paranormal origins. The activity was about to get more extreme.
And all of a sudden, something grabbed the back of my leg and yanked me. I've never felt this before. It felt like they were trying to pull me off the bed. My whole world just got rocked. I turned around, looked back, and there was nothing there. And I looked at my leg where I got grabbed at, and I could see the hairs kind of like standing back up off of like if they were like, you know, condensed from where somebody grabbed me. It felt like a grown man trying to jerk me off the bed. I've never had anything so physical happen to me like that before. That's something I'll never forget.
Greg started to rethink their decision to raise children in the house.
Because if it can move me that much, you know, what else can it do? Finally, we were like, okay, you know, something's going on here. We had contacted the landlord, explained to her that we couldn't stay there anymore. And she was pretty understanding. She's like, I could understand, you know, this isn't the first time we've had people move out in the middle of the month, you know, as quickly as you want to move out.
It felt like a relief was off of my shoulders to be moving away from that place.
We made the move to Tidiu. The house was like 3 times as big as the place we were in, so we were loving it. It was a really nice house, 2-floor, big yard, you know, so we were really happy with it. And it was only 2 blocks down from the school where Emily would be going to. We moved in July, beautiful weather. The neighbors were real nice. They came out and helped me move the stuff in. I really did think everything was left behind.
And we started having experiences at the house that we're at now.
Started hearing like walking across the ceiling. And it's like, okay, we know nobody's up there. You know, we'd hear footsteps again, so I'd run up there and there's nobody there. I'd go back downstairs again. You know, you could hear him walking down the stairs. You know, thump, 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 thump. It just sounds like a heavy guy walking back and forth. And I'd run up there again, you know, just to make sure. There's nobody up there. It is a very creepy feeling.
Maybe a house settling, you're hearing a creaking, but maybe a spirit where you're dealing with sounds, it's going to be more profound. Spirits will violently walk and the whole house would shake. That's when you start to think, okay, that's much more than just a house settling.
We'd come back and, you know, from out to dinner or something like that. And it just seemed like every cupboard in the whole place was wide open. Nothing was really disturbed in the house besides like the cupboard doors. Like there was no cans out of place. There was no, you know, anything missing. Like somebody would have ransacked the place. It was just every cupboard was open. Well, I was like, here we go again, you know. I was like, the last place was quiet, and now we got something going on here. And then, you know, Danielle was like, you know, I really hope something's not, you know, kind of following me. I knew something was following us then. It just seemed like, you know, from one location to another location, there is definitely something out there. I was in the bedroom. That's where I had my computer hooked up. I was playing a video game online, and she was out in the kitchen. All of a sudden, she calls me out there, and her voice kind of sounded funny. I was like, oh, okay, you know, what's going on now? And she's standing in the middle of the kitchen. And she's got this, like, kind of a blank look on her face. And she's got a knife in her hand.
Greg and Danielle Koch had already moved once because of paranormal phenomena. Despite starting out as skeptics, the couple now believed in the dark side as the events became life-threatening.
And she's got a knife in her hand. She's got it up, you know, kind of held like in a stabbing motion. And she's just standing there, and I'm talking to her. I'm like, Danielle, you know, I'm trying to get her to, you know, acknowledge me, to answer me, you know, to at least turn her face and look at me like she was staring off a million miles away. You know, that knife really made me nervous. And so I was like, look, if you don't put that knife down, I'm gonna tackle you down to the ground and take it from you. She finally looked like she snapped out of it. She was like, you know, what's going on? And I was like, I don't know, you tell me. I was like, you've been standing there for about 5-6 minutes now with the freaking knife in your hand. I was like, I was starting yelling at you.
There was just nothing to explain it, nothing. It was just very, very scary.
You are about to see real people.
This is not normal.
Reliving horrifying paranormal encounters for the first time.
Oh, I felt terror.
He wanted her, and he was gonna get her.
I buried this for nearly 30 years.
Be prepared to be afraid.
Story number 21, take one.
Al Kelchner dreamed of living a quiet life in the countryside. And in 2001, he needed some peace more than ever.
I went through a difficult period in 2001, including my father's death, 9/11, and then I was laid off from the company that I was working for. I'd reached a point in my life where I needed a change. I needed some calm in my life. My dad was a farm boy, so being out in the country, especially someone who was from the urban New York metropolitan area, that was a big thrill.
So Al made a change. He left New York City and bought a farm in Illinois.
It was kind of, I don't know, magical. It just fulfilled every expectation I had about the type of little farm I wanted. It was picture, postcard perfect. I just saw potential and possibilities.
Al was so taken with the farm that he bought it on impulse without having stepped foot inside. But things looked very different on the inside.
It was very dark, physically, literally physically dark. Oh, it was threatening. It just, you felt uneasy the second you walked into that house. You felt as though you were being watched. It was a very negative, dark energy.
and extremely intimidating. I did subsequent research and found out that it was a pretty interesting place. There's a lot of history from from the Revolution and colonial days. I was very conflicted. I found my little dream farm, but at the same time, I hated going home at night. The drive, the closer I got, the more unnerved I became because I knew I had to open that back door and walk into a totally dark house out in the country by myself.
Al's uneasy feelings soon gave way to real fear just a few days after moving in.
One morning I got up and I went into the bathroom to shower and get ready for work. And the bathroom was a mess. Towels were on the floor. Toiletries were scattered around. Items had been taken out of the cabinet and they were laying across the top of the vanity. I was uneasy. I had no logical explanation.
But whoever or whatever did this was just getting started.
There was walking, talking, and frequently my face was touched and stroked. It was one of those experiences you can't see, you can't explain, and it's really unnerving. But that wasn't the end of it. I was sitting in the family room and talking with a friend on the phone when I heard suddenly loud knocking by the front door in the living room, which was a room and a half away. And then moved into the parlor, which is adjacent to the living room. And upstairs, directly over my head. It probably lasted a couple of minutes and was incredibly unnerving. And that was when I finally threw in the towel, raised the white flag and said, okay, I believe in you. So we're going to have to coexist.
But peaceful coexistence wasn't exactly what this entity had in mind. It started to put the squeeze on poor Al.
I was in the corner of the kitchen. I had bread in the toaster. And as I stood there, all of a sudden I felt a sharp pain in the back of my neck. I thought, well, maybe I'd slept the wrong way and pinched a nerve. But the pain spread through my shoulders, down into my chest. And I thought, oh my God, I just bought this place. I'm gonna have a heart attack in my new residence and nobody's gonna find me. You know, this is just awful. But then I realized that it wasn't from stress. It was someone who had wrapped their arms around me and was squeezing tighter and tighter. And I said, stop it. And immediately it stopped and dissipated. But that wasn't the end of it. On Thursday of the same week, at about the same time, same location, same routine, toast in the toaster, it happened again. This time, though, just was an immediate bear hug. Someone very large, very strong, very powerful, wrapping their arms around me and pulling me close. And again, I yelled, stop it, and it stopped immediately.
A house could feel physically threatening depending on what entity or spirit is occupying the house. Spirits are what they were in life. So if you're a violent person in life, if you're an angry person in life, you probably carry that to the other side. Spirits can get violent if they just don't want you around. They could want to chase you out.
It was a test let's see if you're going to stay around.
But Al did stay around.
I went upstairs. So I turned into the northwest bedroom, and I opened the door. The minute I stepped foot in that room, I felt nauseous. I felt terror. And I felt as though something was pulling me down to the floor. The terror was almost debilitating. I was pushed a couple times. I was struck, and all of a sudden I felt a sharp pain in my right ribs. And that lasted for probably 3 weeks before it finally dissipated. It's really terrifying, the sense that you're not alone and that something bad could happen.
After moving into his picture-perfect farmhouse, Al Kelchner is under attack by an evil presence.
The feeling of dread and doom was overbearing.
He decides to get help.
I decided to open up the house to investigative teams. It really started with wanting a confirmation that what was happening to me, one, was really happening, and number two, I wasn't losing my mind.
I am pretty sensitive to the spirits, so when I get to a location, I can kind of sense there was a lot of animosity going on at this place. Before I go to any location, I would always try to do some research on it. I read a lot about the people that own the farm initially. There was a doctor as well that lived at the property, and from what I understand, he did some crazy things with the children. He would molest them.
Did you hear that?
Within a few hours, we heard screams by doing some EVP sessions. I felt something come up close to my back, and the next thing I know, I felt just like a bear hug completely around my stomach.
Al called in more investigators.
Oh my God, look!
Seeing a shadow figure, if it's a shadow man, you are seeing a spirit trying to manifest itself. It's trying to show itself to you. So it forms as a dark mass. Shadow people, on the other hand, they were never human. They're a bit more physical, larger shadows with heads, no necks, big shoulders.
Shadow people can be pretty bad and could hurt people. I was scared, frightened for Al's safety.
There came a point where I needed answers and I needed resolution. I believe it was 2011, to do something about the energy at the house. And no one had ever done a cleansing before.
Cleanse this house of all negativity. Only love and light may enter.
So we went from room to room, saged the corners high and low. It was my responsibility to make positive statements and also ban any negative energy. What I didn't know, although I was told afterwards, is that the medium with me could hear growling, furniture being slammed.
Negativity. Only love and light may enter. Cleanse this house of all negativity. Only love and light may enter.
And apparently it worked, because as I look back on that period and prior, the energy was very dark at the house. It isn't anymore.
All the ghosts were gone. All that is, except for one, who seemed rather attached to Al.
A woman in the house, who was usually found on the second floor, died around 1845. And the connection was described to me as something like a soulmate. She described Sarah as my wife from a past life. And it's really difficult for me to wrap my brain around, but they recorded an EVP. It's very brief, it's rapid, but it's pretty clear. It's a female voice saying, "I love him." I love him. It's hard for me to comprehend. I really thought about selling the house and giving up my dream. But I decided to stick with it and see what would unfold. Although I know there's some very negative energy, my experience for the most part has been positive, and somehow I managed to cope with what was going on around me and achieve some level of acceptance. And here I am 8 years later.
When ghosts physically attack the living, victims typically feel themselves being squeezed or hugged. But sometimes, the attacks leave scars that never heal.
That's Tormentor, story number 6.
I was in my 20s, and I was in bed. We were sleeping, and all of a sudden I felt real heavy in the chest. And I woke my husband up and I said, "Get it off my chest. I can't breathe."
Honey, what's going on?
And he said, "There's nothing there." And I said, "There is. I can't breathe." It lasted about 10 minutes. I felt like I was being choked.
Something was attacking me.
I was scared, you know. Nothing like that had ever happened before. And the next day, I had bruises on my neck. They were like finger marks.
Left with bruises and an uneasy feeling that would very soon turn to terror.
Next day, I got flowers. It was like for a funeral.
A few days later, with her husband away for work, Karen gets a nighttime visitor.
I saw a man in a blue shirt. I didn't recognize him at all. I didn't see his face clear. I always saw him at the bottom of the bed. I was being watched. I told him to stop, to go away. "You're not welcome here. Go away." But he didn't. I couldn't count the number of times that I saw him.
But one night, the apparition did more than just watch.
I just felt myself being pulled down, and then he would assault me.
Karen White had been attacked in her bed by a spirit.
And it was every night. He would assault me in some way or another, and then he'd rape me. It got to the point where I was afraid to go to bed at night.
I have, in fact, heard of spirits sexually assaulting or having sex with the living. I had 2 cases personally where that happened. One of those cases went on for almost 20 years.
But in Karen's case, her torturer eventually left her alone.
I wasn't being attacked so much, but it took quite a while before it stopped there.
In the following years, Karen and her husband had a son, Ed. But this picture of family bliss soon turns into a horror movie.
I didn't know it would affect them. I thought it was just me.
The first sign of trouble came when the couple tried to have their baby christened. Now an adult, Ed feels it was no coincidence.
The night before I was supposed to be baptized, the church had burnt down, so I didn't go the next morning, of course.
From his earliest memories, Ed recalls being visited by something evil.
From age 3 and up, it's a piece of cake remembering almost everything, and especially all the horrible stuff. I call him the tormentor. Always come out of the closet, try to scare the hell out of me, come out from underneath the bed or in front of the bed. Or he'd come from a dark corner, got a long face, spiked kind of tongue, horns on top of the head, black shiny skin. That's the tormentor. If he didn't come out, it would be spiders. And it would be the walls, the ceiling, the floors, the bed, everything covered in spiders. And even if I tried to scream, it felt like spiders were coming out of my mouth. So it was a total nightmare city. Mom tried to blame it off as it's my imagination, trying to calm me down, not to freak me out. I knew it was something different.
I wasn't too shocked because, you know, I thought he was having something like I was having. I told him not to worry about it.
I barely didn't get much sleep when I was a kid, and my parents did what most parents do, is they took me in and had me checked out, and none of that made a difference, but I just had to kind of play along so they wouldn't think I'm crazy or I wouldn't get locked up in a loony bin.
The family flees the house. In their new home, there's a sense of relief, a fresh start. That is, until
This thing followed us there as well. It got worse in the teenage years. Writing appeared on the wall. Just telling me to kill other people, kill myself, ways of killing myself. I just had to keep putting all that stuff out of my memory.
I felt bad for him. I just told him it was okay. You know, nothing bad is gonna happen to you.
the suffering continued for 10 more years, until finally, Karen and Ed sought outside help.
We have a friend who belongs to a paranormal group. It was through him that we got this shaman.
They had us basically sit in a chair like this. They put a piece of cloth underneath the chair, and then he used like a sea salt and an eagle's feather, and they just brush down your body. They fold up the doll into like a little totem and just say that you give all your evil spirits and energy to this doll. And then they're supposed to go and burn it. They call it the release place. The doll burns completely, you're out of trouble. And sure enough, the next day they went to the burn site. My doll didn't burn completely.
The ritual seemed to have banished the dark force.
He disappeared for quite a while. I thought it was finished, it was over with. But there he was. He's back.
Come on! Fearing for his mother's safety, Ed took matters into his own hands.
Come and get me! Come on!
I challenged it and told it that you want to attack somebody, leave Mom alone, because Mom's in her 70s. So I said, leave Mom alone. Bring it on. I'm open for it. If you want to attack somebody, you can come and attack me.
To protect his mother from the evil spirits that had tortured her for years, Ed White challenged them to come after him.
Bring it on. I'm open for it. If you want to attack somebody, you can come and attack me.
An ultimatum he'd lived to regret.
He was being attacked, scratched.
My back is covered. My ribs, my stomach, my chest. They take months, sometimes years to heal up. We had a nurse practitioner. She measured my arms and the scratches, and she said there's no way you could have made those scratches yourself on your back. That body ain't meant to bend that way, so there's no way it could have been you. It's always in threes every time it happens. The pain is unbelievable that goes with it. You can't scream, you can't do nothing.
The theory is when you get 3 scratches, because they usually come in threes, that it is the entity's way of mocking the Trinity. It's a matter of making you afraid and keeping you afraid so you don't have the will to fight back.
I can be in bed, I could be in Mom's room, I could be anywhere.
I've known Edwin and Karen for about 5 years. He's a kind, gentle soul, and we see him all the time. He was in my yard, and he dropped right to his knees.
We were talking away, and then they saw my leg get red. They saw the scratches come, and then they just saw the blood just start gushing down the one leg.
He had 3 fresh scratches on his leg, deep red scratches. I go, what was that? And he goes, it got me again. And I go, what do you mean? And he's like, they're after me again, these demons. It was really weird. You'd have to see it to believe it.
And the pizza man saw it too.
He saw the skin rip open, 3 on each side, and he's just like, okay, let me get out of here, please.
To this day, Ed is still attacked.
Some people think you're crazy, you know, sometimes. I worry about Ed because he just can't take it anymore.
Most frightening thing for me is the scratches on my body, and if they're going to get worse, or if it's going to even be taken to another level. Whatever has been following me around, there's going to be no end to this.
Ed and Karen are currently searching for someone who can rid him of his tormentor for good.
Not all ghosts want to attack. No, sometimes they want to snatch. And more often than not, they're after the children.
Story number 3 featuring Kristen, take 1.
We were renting a townhouse, and it was just a lot higher rent, so we moved into this house, which was a little cheaper. We had a yard, and just had all of the amenities that we wanted.
After Kristen and her husband Ken moved in with their 6-year-old daughter Becca, tragedy struck.
My aunt committed suicide. She hung herself in her basement of her home. We're very close. Very close.
What's wrong?
I think she just had a lot of mental things going on.
At the funeral, Kristen says goodbye to a much-loved aunt forever. Or so she thinks.
Just, you're a wreck after those things, you know? We got home, I was grieving, and I was mad at her. I was severely mad. I hated her. And I remember just yelling at her.
Why did you do this? Why?
Just yelling and screaming at her because she was putting our entire family through something we should never have to go through. I told her she was weak. I told her that I was ashamed of her. Of course, I'm screaming at this point at her. Told her that I hated her and that I would never forgive her.
But could Kristen's anguish be enough to connect to the other side?
Spirits and demons can appear more often in times of grief. When people are grieving, it sometimes opens doors for other things to come in and prey on the vulnerable.
I was grieving severely. I was angry. I was hateful.
Why?
So, yeah, I believe that quite possibly that I could have let something in at that point. I remember one night, it was probably about 11:30, and I was flipping over laundry. And I felt something behind me. And I turned and looked, and there she was.
Overcome with grief after the tragic death of her aunt, Kristen Whitesell had unwittingly invited something unexpected into her home.
And I turned and looked, and there she was. I took off running up the stairs screaming, and I turned around, and my aunt was coming up the steps after me. She looked completely different. Demonic. You don't ever get that sight out of your head. And at first I thought I was going crazy. Like I thought you're wanting to see her so badly because I didn't get to say goodbye. When it first begins to happen, you kind of feel like you're imagining all of this. This isn't real. This isn't happening. And you just kind of go on. Second time, you're kind of like, oh God.
I would see her daily in different locations of the home.
Soon, other strange things occur.
My husband was working nights, and we were sitting in the living room, and we heard bumping going on upstairs. I went upstairs, and my bedroom door was open. I heard a big boom, and my bedroom door was closed. There was no drafts, there was no windows open or anything. I always felt like we were being watched. At nighttime, you would hear noises downstairs in the basements, like clanging. Go downstairs, and off in the corner, you would see a shadow in the corner. Looked as though a man that was hunched over who was hovering, and his back was turned to you. He scared me. He scared the crap out of me. Because he would never show me his face, and he just stood there lurking. You don't know what they're capable of. You don't know if by interacting with them, if that's gonna put your family in danger, put them at risk. I felt like I was going crazy.
It wasn't long before things took a violent turn.
When it happened the first time, I would remember waking up in the middle of the night. I would feel as though I was being choked. And I just felt like there was something that had its hands around my neck and was holding me down, and I couldn't yell out. I remember screaming in my dream, and I remember yelling for my husband. But in all actuality, I wasn't. He never heard me at all. It became a nightly thing.
Spirits can physically attack an individual. If you're dealing with a more malevolent entity, the idea is to torment you, to make you weak, and to keep you that way. Malevolent energies want to be in control.
And Kristen wasn't the only one in danger.
The kids would tell us that they hear things and that they saw things and that they felt things.
Searching for answers, the couple discovered that the house had secrets.
The house was built, it was a slave home. And the upstairs was the master's quarters. Off of the side walls, there were little rooms, and they were cubby holes where the slaves would go and hide when the masters were entertaining guests. Well, you still had access from Rebecca's room into one of what was the slaves' quarters. Rebecca would say that a man on fire would come out of that cubby hole that used to be the slave quarters. At first, she kind of made it sound like it was a dream. Mom, there's a man in my room. It started off, he was only coming maybe once a month. And then it became 2 to 3 times a week. And then it became a nightly thing that he was coming to her. He would encourage her to go with him. He wanted her. And he was gonna get her.
apparition of a burning man was threatening to take Kristen Whitesell's daughter away with him.
He wanted her, and he was gonna get her. It scared her pretty badly. Immediately, as a mother, you're going into protection mode. Is he trying to take her soul? Like, what's he trying to do? And all I could think is, you're not taking mine. It's not happening. She's mine. And I told her, you tell him no, that you're not going anywhere. You stay right here. I can't protect you if you're gone. There's no greater fear than the fear that your child is not safe in their own home.
Fearing for her family's safety, Kristen calls in paranormal investigators.
A lot of times, spirits can be attracted to loss or mourning. Demons can come around because they follow someone. A lot of negative energy can happen. To get started, we took in our EVP recorders, our K2 meters, and our DVR system at the time.
My husband and Jeremy were downstairs in the basement.
We had motion detectors on every floor, and from there, we just began asking questions. Who are you? What is your name? Why are you here?
Did you hear that?
All of a sudden, this real deep, nasty, maniacal man came over our EVP recorders just laughing at us. It was very overwhelming and kind of frightening.
Voices on the EVPs, they were mocking my husband.
Jeremy, you there? Something's moving upstairs.
Our motion detectors would go off, and we'd go up to see what was causing it. And as soon as we went upstairs, the motion detector downstairs in the basement would go off. Like, almost like it was playing games with us.
Come in, Jeremy.
And all of a sudden, we just see a shadow just go from the front door into where we are.
Did you hear that?
Really fast.
And you can edit this out. I remember him saying his exact words, "Oh, they did not stay in that basement very long." I don't think that their feet touched the stairs. He had to be scared, quite honestly. He had to be. Who wouldn't?
This investigation and client, to me, is one of the most active places I've been to. A part of me believes that it's just negative spirits from the railroad days, but another part of me believes that it could be demonic.
Kristen and Ken are now frightened enough to try and get the house cleansed.
When we conducted the cleansing, we had 2 Wiccans with us, and they conducted the blessing, and they went into every crack and cranny of that house with salt and oils. According to them, they were able to kick out the real maniacal spirits.
But for the family, the memories of what happened here still haunted them. They had to leave.
You can't force a child to feel safe again. It definitely was the scariest period of my life. You're not in control. It's time to cut our ties and go. My aunt had passed away, and normally that's who I would go to talk to, but she wasn't there. It's hard to recover from something like that. I'm never gonna go back there. I haven't been back, and I don't plan on ever going back.
was just nothing to explain it, nothing. It was just very, very scary.
You are about to see real people.
This is not normal.
Reliving horrifying paranormal encounters for the first time.
We just sat there with our jaws dropped. We couldn't believe what we were seeing.
When spirits are intent on doing evil.
The basement is super old and creepy.
I buried this for nearly 30 years.
Be prepared to be afraid.
Story number 14, featuring Mandy. Take one.
My name is Mandy Lynn, and I am co-owner of Liberty Tattoo in Libertyville and here in Antioch. We took over the building in May of 2007. When we first saw the space, we'd realized the capstone on the outside said it was built in 1904. There's a lot of history in the building.
History that would come back to haunt them. It started with their renovations. Seems someone or something didn't like their taste.
We would close at the end of the night. We'd get in the next day and there's paintbrushes missing or rollers missing or... The art that we bought came with glass in them, so we decided to put them behind the counters and bolted them to the wall with the wiring to the frame, secured them to the wall. The first plate glass picture had fallen off the wall and was down on the ground and the glass was busted everywhere.
We just chalked it up as not being hung properly. The next day when the second one was down, we knew that something else was going on.
And then it was the last picture that had glass in it, had come down and was broken.
We put it up right. There's no reason why it should have just fallen off the wall.
Soon after opening, Mandy and Eric noticed signs of an unexpected visitor.
When we opened for business, and the first thing that we noticed is that there were large male bare footprints on top of our display cases that are 3.5 feet off of the ground.
I was trying to rack my brain who would have been walking around barefoot on the floor, which would have been more reasonable than on top of the counter.
And then their employees started acting strangely.
The boy employees just were terrified to come into the basement. We have supplies down here that I'd have to send them downstairs in the basement to get, and they would fight over, no, you go, no, you go, I'm not going into the basement.
The basement is super old and creepy. There's a certain area where the concrete is dirt, and it was either dug up or never filled in. And we found that to be very unusual and wondered what's buried there.
The first time I saw the hole in the floor, I just was trying to figure out why you would pour concrete everywhere else in this basement except for that one space and what was particularly special about that one spot.
Mandy and Eric discovered that they weren't the first to feel a male entity in their midst. They learned he even had a nickname.
Actually, one of my neighbors used to work in the space. She came in and we had metal ladders leaned up against the front door to the basement. And she said, you need to be careful because there's plate glass in that door. And I said, no, it's just wood, it's just painted. And she said, no, we painted over the glass because Lloyd used to stare through the window, standing on the stairs and peer through that window. And that was directly behind the counter where all the employees sat. So she said, we just painted the windows because it was freaking us out looking over there and seeing him standing there. It made me a little creeped out knowing that he was here. To me, it was very obvious that he likes women quite a bit. Even with myself, he would stand behind me and breathe. Even with me sitting in my chair, you could just feel him behind me. But there were multiple times where customers, female customers, would be across the room looking through the tattoo flash racks, and there's no one behind them, and you could watch them go, you know, and I'd say, "Are you okay?" And they're like, "Was there someone just standing behind me?" And I'm like, "No." The racks would just open one leaf at a time, very, very slowly, all by themselves, until a particular sheet of flash was shown, which had a bunch of angels on them.
Usually it was a female client would turn around in a panic and look at us, and we'd smile and wave and nod, and yeah, I see it too.
After a while, it got to be a little bit much, so we put in cameras. One day, our employees called us and said, "What the hell happened here last night?" And he said, "There's a sign ripped off the wall, one of the pictures is down off the wall, and the plant, which is a very large plant and a very large planter, was tipped completely over." And my husband and I reviewed the security tapes. At about 9:30 in the morning, all at the same time, the sign to the handicap bathroom fell off the wall, ripping off the drywall sheeting with it, fell off the wall. The picture dropped off of the wall, and the planter just tipped over. There was no one in the studio. Like, our studio was not even open yet. The alarm was still set.
A spirit may destroy somebody's belongings or hide them. Mostly it's to get their attention, to let them know they're there, or if they want something and you're not paying attention to them, they're going to get your attention one way or another.
Soon, Mandy had other visitors.
There's a little girl in here, a little girl spirit. The first couple times I saw her, she was just very playful. She would hide between the couches. She would play all over the studio.
I always have been a believer of paranormal. I've experienced too many things, seen too many things, felt too many things for me to say nothing else is going on.
But one of Mandy's visitors wasn't exactly harmless.
One day I was taking a nap.
Mandy Lynn's new tattoo parlor was full of unexplained activity. Strange presences, ghosts, and falling objects. But no one had been physically attacked. Yet.
And as I was sleeping, I could feel that I was being pulled by my feet down across the couch. And when I opened my eyes, I realized that there was no one there. There's just no one there, but I could feel myself being pulled down the couch. And that's when I freaked out. And my husband came flying into the room, and he's like, "What the hell is wrong?" And I'm like, "That thing just dragged me down the couch." And he's like, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yes." "Are you hurt?" "No." But a little freaked out that the thing can actually move me.
The attack prompts Mandy and Eric to bring in paranormal investigator Bob Jensen.
So we came in here looking to see if we had any real high EMFs. We also used the audio recorders, digital recorders, to see what kind of audio we would be able to pick up down here. With different pictures that we took, most of them came up on the full color spectrum camera that we had anomalies that would pop up. We had a couple that showed up near a floodlight. There was actually a figure standing there. The pictures themselves were captured at the far end of the basement.
Seeing the sheer size of Lloyd was very unnerving. I very much get the feeling that he's a sexual predator, and then to see him in that form made me very, very uncomfortable.
It definitely has a male physique to it, and there was a series of photographs. It looks like he's standing, and then the next picture looks like he's going into a crouching position. A couple more photos, it looks like he was sitting on almost like a crate or box.
It's creepy as hell. I mean, this was like a more primal form, just a male shape, but very large, very powerful shape.
They also caught a voice on tape.
On the audio recordings, one was a little girl's voice. The little girl's voice was warning us. She said, "Be careful, he's coming." You know, "Be careful, he's coming." She kept saying, "Be careful."
Bob researched the history of the building and discovered a chilling story.
There were claims that there might have been different crimes that were committed at this particular property. But the crimes against women that might be tied in with this particular location definitely goes back to the 19-teens and maybe up until the 1930s or 1940s.
For sure, finding out the history and that there was possible rape and killing down here made a lot of sense, because there's one particular spot in the basement that it's very hard for women to be near without feeling very uncomfortable. And when you ask every single one of them kind of what do you feel, and they feel like victimized sexually.
With this building, a lot of these fieldstone, there's also limestone and quartz. And limestone and quartz have been reported to actually hold on to residual hauntings. This is definitely a good catalyst for holding on to and retaining a lot of information that's happened over numerous decades.
With minerals such as quartz and limestone, things like that, I'm not sure if it's an attraction for spirits, but they can use the energies from those things. It can also trap energy as well. So if a foundation is built upon these things, it could fuel more paranormal activity.
Mandy and Eric don't need any more convincing and quickly take action.
After the investigation, we asked a couple of our friends who are spiritual healers and work with energy to come into the space and help us try and clear out the energy that was here. We had a couple people come in that used sage sticks and smudge sticks and just asked the entities that if there was something that they needed or if there was some help that we could give them to move to another place.
Whatever they did seemed to work.
I don't think the little girl was here any longer at all. I think Lloyd hung out a little longer. It took him a little longer to move on. I find it very important that we had the space cleansed and the spirits cleared, because I don't know if I would have been comfortable staying or any of the other employees would have been comfortable staying much longer.
Not all spirits are evil like Lloyd, but even the nicer ones can turn malevolent when the living try to take what's theirs.
Story number 18, featuring Tammy, take 1.
We bought the house in 2003. The feeling we got when we went in, it was just a positive feeling in the beginning. We just kind of knew that that was the place to be.
All right, let's get to work.
It was a small community. We knew we were going to try and have a child.
But Tammy's rosy outlook quickly starts to pale.
Probably about a week after we moved in, and my husband was alone in the house for the first time. He said that he heard a banging on the wall coming closer and closer.
Hello?
Tammy Northcutt and her husband Jerry had recently moved into a new home. Within the first week, they were hearing strange noises.
He said that he heard a banging on the wall coming closer. There was nothing there.
Next, it was Tammy's turn to start hearing things.
In the middle of the night, I got up because I heard arguing, and I didn't know where it was coming from. But we've got a vent that's in our living room, a heater vent. And you could tell that it was coming up from there. We would go down in the basement to find out what was going on. We could never see anything. It was just constantly just there, you know, but there was nothing, you couldn't see anything, but you could hear it.
The objective for spirits making themselves known could be a number of things. It could be they have a message they want to pass on. Others don't know they're passed on, so they're trying to interact. They're trying to be a part of the living world.
The couple suffered in silence until help arrived, by pure chance.
There was a shop, downtown Janesville. We met the couple. We were talking about the house, and they overheard us talking. And they said, we can help. They said that they could come bless the house. They blessed the house, and the things stopped for a while.
The house seemed to settle down.
18 months later, Tammy and Jerry had their first child, Connor.
As soon as my son was born, it started up again, the knocking. The cabinet doors in the kitchen, you can hear open and close. And, well, the basement door started opening and closing. My son's door was opening and closing. It started to kick up again.
These mysterious events continued until after Connor's second birthday. Then they turned more sinister.
Connor started seeing something on his bed that he referred to as Mr. Raider. He would tell me that I needed to get Mr. Raider off the bed. I would look, I could not see anything.
And then another unwelcome guest paid a visit.
An old woman who would shake his bed in the middle of the night.
That's when he would come running to our room about 2 a.m. It got to the point where he just refused to go into the room. My husband's mother had passed away before Connor was born, but we do have a picture of her, and he kept on looking at her picture, and he asked me to tell her to stop waking him up in the middle of the night.
Soon after that, Tammy had a terrifying moment.
heard the door close, and Connor was in the room.
Connor?
And I was frantic.
Connor? Hey!
I didn't know what to do. I couldn't get the door open, and my son was in there, and I had to get to him. And I was actually going to call the fire department to have them come remove the door. I was so scared. And the door clicked, and I reached and I turned the knob, and it opened, and I was able to get him out. After that, we took the handle off the door so it could no longer latch.
Tammy and her husband were at a breaking point. They reached out for help a second time.
I've been investigating since the 90s, about 1997. They were scared. They really were. Our first investigation there probably produced the most evidence out of any single one investigation we've ever done anywhere. Throughout the night, we had what we call Class C EVPs, electronic voice phenomenon. But there were some times that we got what we call Class A EVPs, where we could hear exactly what it was saying.
Stop saying that. Get out.
Get out. Come get us. Stop saying that. We had something we thought growled at us. And all of a sudden, we hear, "Wow, wow." Our first impression was that we were dealing with something very negative. This thing is saying, I'm the boss here.
A few days later, the entity reveals a violent side.
I felt somebody choke me. There was pressure on my neck.
Tammy Northcutt and her husband sensed an evil force in their home. Their son, Connor, was being traumatized, and Tammy herself had felt attacked by some entity.
I felt somebody choke me. There was pressure on my neck, and it felt like there was hands around my neck, like I was being strangled.
Baby, hey!
And it was almost like I was being pushed into the bed, but, and then I felt like a release and I was able to sit up. But it was awful. It was an awful feeling.
Tammy asked the paranormal group to come back. This time they brought Paul, their most gifted psychic.
He came over and he was getting messages already from before he even got to our house.
The first thing Paul picked up was that the house had once been a seedy drinking den.
He's talking about this place being, where there's drunk people, and he makes the sound of one guy that just continually goes, "Arr, arr, arr." And I about fell off my stool when he did that, because it sounded just like what we heard. Our biggest question was, who was saying, "Come get us," and who told us to get out?
I was telling him about where Connor was seeing Mr. Rader. I showed him the room. And he told us it wasn't Mr. Rader, it was Mr. Reader. And in the 1930s, there was like a traveler's lodge that sat where our house is now. He said Mr. Reader owned the hotel.
And Paul's theory is that Mr. Reader is hanging out in the master bedroom area. And he's not a very nice guy. And he's probably the one that told us to get out.
Finally, they could put a name to this sinister spirit.
He started talking to Mr. Reader. As he was explaining to Mr. Reader that this is a different time, women are equal, the light started to brighten up in the room. And it felt lighter in the room. And now I don't have that negative feeling anymore. That's gone.
Paul had cleansed the house of the malevolent spirit, but still had some questions.
He asked Jerry what the name Dell meant. And he said, well, it's Della. That was my mom. She had passed away. And that's who was following Connor around.
The female spirit who had been waking Connor, Tammy's mother-in-law, wasn't trying to frighten him. She was trying to protect him. It was her voice that Tammy heard among the arguing in the basement.
I actually kind of felt a little comforted, knowing that she was looking out for him. Every once in a while, you'll still hear the door slamming in the back and the heavy footsteps going down the stairs. But knowing what I know now because of Paul, I do feel better. And kind of knowing that I'm not going to get harmed, I'm not going to get hurt, I think makes me feel more comfortable.
Sometimes ghosts may haunt the living out of vengeance, perhaps due to tragedy, a life cut short. These vindictive spirits can harbor ill intentions, even when their victims are the innocent.
Paranormal Survivor 2, Michael's Haunted Apartment, story number 4. Take 1.
It was 2005, and a couple friends of mine, longtime friends, bought a building that had a fire, and they decided to renovate it.
After his friends finished renovating, they offered to rent Michael one of the apartments.
When I moved in, it felt cozy. It was a comfortable little place. I thought something I could live in for a while.
My thought exactly. Look around.
I actually had my stepson who was living with me at the time. My kids would come over on the weekends. So it was a small apartment, but that was it, just him and I.
Michael's initial cozy feeling would quickly fade.
The strangeness in this apartment started about 3 days in. We started hearing the cabinet doors in the kitchen. Like someone was opening them just enough so they'd tap, tap, tap. So went in to check it out, could never find out what was going on. I had an exterminator come, and because I thought maybe there was mice or something, but there wasn't. So I had no explanation for it at that point. It was shortly after that, other things started to happen. The stereo would blast on at 3:20 in the morning, every single morning, and it would be full blast. I thought maybe my son was goofing around with me and turning it on.
Teacher.
But then with everything else that was going on, I started to believe him that he wasn't. The electric would go on and off. It would flicker. And just weird things we'd hear banging on the wall. And there was no reason for it. I was the only apartment on that end, so nobody could bang on the walls. So we started to figure out that something strange was going on. There was 3 different times that I would try to look up the history of this building to find out what might have happened. And every time I would type in to start looking, my computer would drop off. Nothing else would die, all the rest of the power stood on, just the computer would go off. It was a brand new computer. I brought it into the service guy 3 different times. He finally yelled at me and told me don't come back, because there was nothing wrong with it.
Something in the building did not want Michael to know its secrets. Michael Vara was having strange experiences after moving into a building that had been renovated due to a fire.
At first, I didn't make any connection to the fire at all. I thought our minds were playing with us. So I thought that, we were missing something, that, at some point we were going to say, that's what it was, and laugh about it. I had rented a movie, and in this movie, in the end, there was extras, and it showed how to do EVPs. So we thought, well, let's try it.
EVP, or electronic voice phenomena, are believed to pick up sounds from the spirit world.
One night after recording, and we picked something up.
No. Have anyone listen in? Here we go.
What we got first was like growling. We'd hear growling on it, like kind of like demonic type growls. And my son at one point said, "Go to the light, go to the light,"
Get away from the light.
You could hear like a man's voice, a demonic type man's voice. I started picking and poking and trying to make them mad. And I said, "Oh, I'm gonna have a cigarette." I had said, "Do you want a cigarette?" I said, "You can't have any, you're dead." And when we played the tape back, this little girl on the tape said, "So who cares?" And it was as clear as day.
So who cares?
And I'm thinking, a little girl on the other side that don't care? This is dangerous. My hair just stuck up on end. I couldn't believe it. I said, wow, this is real. I invited a woman over to watch a movie, have some dinner with me one night, and I never told her anything because, I wasn't sure exactly what was happening. And a picture of my kids, it came off and it flew across the room and then slammed against the radiator. And we kind of laughed it off and played it off. And I walked her out to her car. And walking her out, I started telling her what's been going on. And, you know, she acted like she was interested, but I think she thought I was crazy. And when I walked back into the apartment, a horseshoe came off the wall that I had screwed into the plastered wall. It came off the wall, and it just skinned my head. I mean, just thrown at me, like somebody was, you know, like somebody was angry and just threw it at me. At this point, I'm not feeling too good about the apartment at all. I'm now worried about my kids' safety. When all the kids were over, I had 4 kids, so there was times when they would be camping out in the living room floor.
And that's where you may come in. If you drive a tank, APC, or other heavy-wheeling vehicle across the tracks in other than prepared crossings, you may be knocking the rails out of alignment. That makes it hard to train. Whatever you do, make sure you take the whole vehicle to railroad tracks only at prepared crossings.
And there was a few times that they would hear, like, banging on the floor around them. And, you know, I didn't know what to tell them. So we started all sleeping together, camping out on the living room floor together. And my stepson walks in the room and he says, "Dad, do you see this?" Because I heard a lot of clicking, but I didn't pay attention to it. I looked up and the mouse on the computer was moving.
Michael Vara and his son had discovered a paranormal entity in his apartment. And it was gaining strength.
I looked up and the mouse on the computer was moving and it was clicking stuff. And we just sat there with our jaws dropped. We couldn't believe what we were seeing.
Was the home finally ready to give up its secrets?
Spirits being made up of energy can manipulate electronics quite easily. A computer is no different. I've done 2 cases where it has happened. I also worked another case where spirit actually things were actually typed out on the computer.
And sure enough, there was a picture of the newspaper. The building was, you know, burnt up, the fire trucks in front of it, and there was a little story on it. Talked about how the fire started and how the smoke poured through the building, and that there was 2 deaths in the building. There was a little girl and her father who lived in my apartment, and when the fire broke out, the little girl hid in my closet. But she hid in there. The father apparently died in the hallway. She died in the closet of the building. At that point, the computer went out again. I felt very uneasy when I read that. It seemed like they were getting more comfortable with us, and they were doing, you know, more and more was happening as we went along.
I don't care what you want. I want you gone.
I started to provoke them. I would just say horrible things to them, like, you know, "You're dead. You don't belong here. Your life's over. Get out of my apartment. I'm going to call somebody in here. We're going to get you. You're going to go." I threatened to get a priest in there. I threatened to bless the place and all these things. And every time I did that, the lamp would get real bright. I mean, almost where you're waiting for the bulb to blow up. I mean, that's how bright it would get. Then it would go back down dim again. And so I could tell I was starting to touch some nerves somewhere.
Michael's threats had no effect.
This letter A that formed on the wall was in a ball of light, like a spotlight. And in the middle was a dark, shadowy A on there. It turns out the little girl that lived there, her name was Angela.
People who die suddenly and tragically often don't necessarily realize that they've passed on. Therefore, they're going to go back to the place that's most familiar to them.
I had goosebumps all over my body, and it scared the hell out of me. The last straw came almost 2 months in this apartment. I woke up one morning and I smelled something burning. That's what woke me up. And I noticed it was too bright. I looked and the blinds were gone off the window. I sat up and looked, and clear across the room, these blinds were laying on my electric heater, melting. And I was the only one home that day. These blinds were screwed into the wall, the wood frame of the window, and you would have to take off caps. You would have to take off 4 screws, and then you would have to lift them off to take them off. And I didn't hear any of that happening while I was sleeping. I started packing. I said, that's it. That was the end of it. I packed up that day. I packed up quick and left. I have no doubt in my mind it was connected, and I think I ticked them off enough where they were willing to bring me with them, because that's obviously they were trying to burn the place down again. I mean, that's sort of, I mean, why else would you put plastic on a heater? After that, my friend Frank, who owned the building, he decided he would move in. He would take my apartment. He lasted there about a month. And then a month later, the building was up for sale. And I tried to talk to these guys. Why? He said they fixed it up. Why'd they sell it? They won't tell me. I think I know, though.